May I ask who M. Robinson is representing?
It's got up here, this meeting is being recorded, being sent to it. They did
Did you
that.
hear that? I didn't get one word of that.
I heard her say something about it.
Cell phone. I muted her. Sorry, Jan. No, thank you. You're unmuted. It's hot.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Bring the Council of Government meeting for February 10th, 2025 to order. I'm glad to see my buddy Laverne Coleman here, so would you mind leading us in a pledge and invitation?
Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for giving us a chance to meet today. Control the government of our government. I pray that you'll watch over us, guide us, and let us make the right decisions and move forward. I ask this in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Raise the flag. Salute. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Laverne. Any amendments to the agenda? Hearing none. Motion to accept.
Motion to accept.
Brenda, for a second. Second. Randy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, your agenda was sent to you via email. Hope you had a chance to look over the minutes. If not, they're in your packet. I will accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Lynn, second.
Second.
Laverne. All those in favor? Thank you all. Any opposed? Okay. Alan and I, along with Noel, our attorney, have brought up a discussion about attendance. Today's perfection. Thank you, everybody, for being here. But we've had over the last, almost going on a year, trouble getting a quorum. We've had to start meetings late. We do a lot of stuff here. This is an important board and we need members present. So we thought that we would have a discussion about attendance and what everybody's opinions are. I mean, I think regular members, so like obviously you. But Alan, you wanna?
Well, one of the things, I think the main things that we were talking about is, you know, before COVID, there was ambiguous state authority to meet remotely. And the school government has written extensively about cities and counties and remote participation since the legislature clarified during COVID the ability to have remote meetings. There's a lot less discussion, and there's been a recent court case as well about remote participation, but it's all based on the city and county statutes and how they're written to require a quorum, and, you know, language in the statutes about being present. Well, there are no corresponding statutes for non-city county boards. And so I have been concerned, but not overly concerned about the question. But Brent brought it up recently to us And so I asked Noel to look into it, and Noel, of course, you can speak for yourself. She responded to me by email that her opinion is that we do need a quorum to be members present in the room.
Physically present.
Physically present. Now, it's a lot easier for a city or a county than for a regional government where people are coming from far and wide than it is for, so we have a geographical challenge. Teresa, you're a good hour plus from here. Lamont, who's not in the room, is about an hour and a half from here, which is a major commitment to come for a meeting. But if we're gonna need folks in the room in order to conduct business, well, first of all, so there's two questions. There's the question of an attendance policy that, broadly, and then what about, how does remote participation play into that? Because ultimately, the purpose of being on the board and having you be participating is, largely related to getting a quorum so that we can conduct our business. And so, Mike was telling me when we were having the conversation that pretty much every board he sits on, how many boards are you on, Mike?
14.
They pretty much all have an attendance policy. We don't have one. We've got a remote participation policy. Likely statute that created the remote meeting authority during COVID that was rescinded when or not rescinded, but no longer in effect because the disaster is no longer declared. Probably makes our remote attendance policy moot. So I just thought I would, sort of give you that background and let you guys talk about what we should do about it.
So, Mr. Chair, was there a problem with Hanover attendance?
No, there's
Okay.
not been.
Actually,
Okay,
no.
so, well, I'll make sure, so I will be coming. When I was on the school board, they did change that policy. If you're not under a state of emergency, you can come in remotely, but you cannot vote. I don't know if that's something y'all want to adopt. They're what, every other month?
Our meetings are more or less
Meetings a year.
every other month.
If you decide to adopt a part of that policy, that might be
I
something.
think we did something weird too.
No change here.
We did something about.
Yeah, I mean, every board can, and honestly, I serve on 14 different committees outside of my county commissioner 2 meetings. Every single one of them, with the exception of this, has an attendance policy.
Mhm.
And it's usually 2/3. That's the general rule. A lot of them are only every other month. Like I'm president of the foundation at the community college. We meet every other month. And you have to make 4 meetings, so that's the deal. And a lot of them are like that.
What's the quorum?
5.
Board of
Five
Us is
for us here is
yeah.
5.
For this meeting, it's 5. For the board meeting, the annual meeting, it's 23.
And please understand, we are not singling anybody out here. It's just that it is imperative that we have an in-person quorum. We spend a lot of money here every year, and it affects all 4 counties. You should have your county or your municipality represented here, if nothing else, to advocate for your county or municipality.
And I'll say that there's probably a couple of different ways that this could play out, right? So for the county members are automatically. And so if a county member's participation, and we haven't really had this problem with county members, but just theoretically, if a county member's participation was a problem and we weren't, we were having challenges with quorum because of that, we would probably have to go back to that county commission and say, could you appoint somebody different, because we don't have the ability to, the county member is automatically on the executive committee. So the executive committee has no real say in who the county member is and whether they're on the executive committee. That's an automatic thing. For municipal members, every municipal delegate from all 40 municipalities is eligible to be on the executive committee. We've got a policy. We've got a requirement that you can't have more than 2 municipal members per county, but we have a policy, not a policy, a sort of a unspoken policy that we're going to have 1 municipal member per county plus, which is 4, and we have 5 municipal members, plus a at-large municipal member, which will be a second member from any one county. And for the municipal members, and it's later on the agenda, this board nominates a slate of municipal members to the general membership for the February annual meeting where they appoint those folks. So for the municipal members, this board does have more flexibility on if there were an attendance issue, resolving it in some way, I think, within the executive committee. Probably would be a bylaws change to say that somebody would maybe automatically no longer be, would create a vacancy, and then the board has the authority to fill the vacancy. Again, these are all sort of questions that I think are just worth discussing how the board would want to deal with it. But ultimately, I think we run into the issue that we need to make sure we have enough people in the room to conduct our business.
Does everybody have a backup person to cover them if they can't be there?
So we do have alternates. Every jurisdiction has not appointed an alternate. But I think maybe more importantly, from an executive, that's really for the general membership. For the executive committee, because what the executive committee does is a little more, not so much technical, but COG stuff is complicated and it takes a little bit of time to get used to it. And we don't appoint, for example, Lynn is not on the executive committee as the delegate for Carolina Beach so that his alternate would fill his space. Lynn himself is on the executive committee. The executive committee elected, or not the executive committee, the general membership elected Lynn, not Carolina Beach. And so I don't think it would be appropriate for, I think it's Jay.
Yeah, send someone else.
Whoever the alternate is for Carolina Beach to come once a year and have any idea what he's doing, and he's not really voting as a proxy for Lynn. And so I don't think at the annual meeting, where essentially all we're doing is either making a bylaws amendment or electing the executive committee, that's the kind of thing where I think the delegate or their alternate is representing their town, their community, and it's appropriate for the alternate to fill that role. I don't think in this executive committee realm, at least that's my opinion, I think it's less appropriate for the alternate to fill that role because, again, what we do is complicated enough that repetition, that participation is where you learn the role, and it's important, I think, that member be the voting member.
Noel, would you like to add anything for those newer members? Noel is our attorney.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. There's now a trash truck outside my window, so hopefully.
Good time.
It's either airplanes or trash trucks or fire trucks. I mean, I think you have to have a quorum. I think this entity meets 4 times a year. I think what Alan's saying is correct, or about 4 times a year, that you really can't have a designee alternate because of the complicated nature of what you're doing, but also the fact that the executive committee is being elected. I think that the best guidance is that, as a creature of a regional council government would be a creature of 160A, that you are required to have a quorum in person under the Court of Appeals case. So an attendance policy is great, but I think the expectation for everybody that has been appointed is that you are setting this on your calendar and avoiding conflicts so that you will have a quorum when the meeting is taking place.
The other thing I think that's worth just sort of noting is that we haven't really had this conversation yet. So we've got, for example, 2 members on the, remote, 2 executive committee members who are remote today, who up until today, we've always said it's fine to be remote. So there's not a whole lot of, impetus to drive an hour to a meeting when you've been able to be a full participant remotely. So, I think we take that into consideration, I think, as well. I think it would be good to hear from Jan and Teresa, like, how might this affect your willingness or ability to attend in person and be a contributing member from a quorum standpoint?
Absolutely. This is Teresa. So, yeah, I was coming before we were allowed to do Zoom and willing to come back. Just getting through Hampstead traffic, I was like, hey, if I can do it Zoom, I'm going to do it Zoom. So if I have to drive, I'll drive. And we do. I mean, we have a policy here in Surf City. I mean, as far as like, you're allowed to join by Zoom, but as far as like, as far as our town, you have to be present to vote. So I understand completely.
Thank you, Teresa. I have a very.
Wait, hang on.
I think Jan's trying to
Oh,
talk.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jan.
Hang on, let me unmute her.
I think you can fully unmute her.
Is she frozen?
She's
Yeah,
on
she's-
her end.
Looks like she's frozen.
Jan, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself?
She's not frozen.
Very
Very still.
She's sitting very still.
Very still. There you go.
Were you speaking to us?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I don't have a problem either today. You don't want me down there because I've been taking care of a sick husband. So not gonna share the germs, but no, I don't have a problem with coming in.
Should there be a contingency for someone that's not well, but still wants to, I mean, what's more important?
There's excused
The attendance?
absences.
Yeah,
You're
well,
sick, you're sick.
right.
Family issue, family's first, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the alternative is not come in person because you're unwell, or not come at all, or just not come in person and not vote, but still be able to join in the discussion and continue to participate as a board member, even when, in a situation like this, you're just doing it out of the, health concerns and protecting the rest of us from germs. That's, like you said, whether it's an excused absence or some, we want to encourage folks to participate remotely when that's the best option. We don't want to penalize people for that.
No, that's not the goal. But we just need to know we have a quorum in the room. Any other discussion, Lynn? Okay.
I think the other question is, do we need a written policy? Do we need to just sort of agree?
You need to have a written policy.
Yeah.
Everybody be on the same page with you.
Hey,
Yeah, the problem when you have a verbal, what he heard and what I heard may be different.
Yeah.
When you write it down, that forces us to a consensus.
So I can try to put to paper for your next meeting, a written policy I don't know if it needs to be in the bylaws or if it can just be a policy that the board adopts. I think that's,
If we all signed, if you had something and we all signed it knowing that there's 6 meetings a year, you're required to make 4. And we all sign it,
Exactly.
I think that's sufficient.
and then, so I'll do that. What would be the ramifications of not attending 4?
That's a good question.
I think in most of them, right, it's if you don't have, if you're outside the policy, then that seat becomes vacant. It's up to the board to either, depends on how
Create a
you,
vacancy.
yeah, depends on how that particular position, like the county, obviously, you'd have to go back to the county and get them to appoint somebody else. But if it was me, you could just elect someone else.
So I think so the policy would need to be that it would create a municipal vacancy. For the county, it wouldn't create a vacancy, it would just create a conversation with the county.
Because counties you can't not have the county represented there, right? I mean, by the bylaws.
I would say in the policy to add subparts for municipality members. Even in your unwritten rule, right? Your unwritten rule, you spoke about municipality members. You spoke about annual meeting attendance, you spoke about wellness, all those could be subparts of the original policy. Even in your consequences, repercussions, whatever we'll call it.
So for community, it creates vacancy. So let's pick on Lamont since he's not here, unfortunately. Obviously he would have to drive an hour and a half, and because of that, he has always been participating remotely. And so let's just say, for example, it's unrealistic for him to drive, so he would be in violation of the policy. So if it created a vacancy, it would be a Columbus County municipal vacancy. And so the board would, I assume, direct me to reach out to Columbus County municipal delegates to see who might be A, willing to serve on the committee, but B, able to attend in person. Needless to say, there are a lot, the closest somebody can drive from a municipality in Columbus County isn't that close. Sandyfield's not too bad. Bolton's not too bad.
Yeah, legal.
Regal is not a municipality. So, but in some ways, this policy is going to very much discourage participation from Tabor City, from Chadburn, from Cerro Gordo, from Boardman. Frankly, Topsail Beach and Surf City, it's a long drive. So I think the one challenge with the policy is that as a regional board, we don't want board members who are all concentrated, all just concentrated around Wilmington because it's convenient to come to the meeting.
And that is a thing when you have to drive, like I said, an hour and a half from Cerro Gordo, Boardman, I think Boardman about the furthest one away. And that's a 5-hour commitment.
Yeah, it is.
Right, well, driving both ways and time of the meeting.
It's the day for you.
Yeah.
If you're coming from a Tabor City or a Cerro Gordo.
And so do we want to have any flexibility in the policy? Because of that, as long as we have a quorum in the room, it's not, in theory, it's not a problem that Lamont participates remotely. We don't necessarily need him off the board, particularly because if it's going to be Columbus or Pender that are almost always going to have a harder time getting here, you're going to replace them with somebody who's going to have just as long or similarly long distance to get here, and they may also have trouble meeting the policy. So
I think the question is, if a person can't make it and participates online, are they absent? I would say no, they're not absent.
They just can't vote.
They just can't vote.
And they can't make up a quorum.
And they can't make a quorum.
Which is a problem.
Yeah.
Having a quorum.
I mean, ultimately, we need to have people in the room because we need to have a quorum.
Yeah.
And so not having a ramifications for participating remotely, in theory, threatens the ability to have a quorum consistently.
Hey, Sam,
Yes, sir.
we did something with the RPO about attendance a while back. What was it we did?
That change, I'm trying to, I think that might have been when Patrick was here in terms of the attendance policy. I'd have to go back and check.
First came on, okay.
The RPO has a policy that I don't think would apply well here necessarily.
No, because
It's that if you missed 3 meetings in a row, I think you're considered.
your seat is considered vacant and therefore no longer counts against quorum. So if we have 10 members, for example, but the 10th member on their 3rd missed meeting in a row, we're now only looking at quorum from a total of 9.
Right.
But then if they come again, they're
immediately active.
stated. That, I don't think that would work very well here.
And that's more of a blanket for all the RPOs across the state. I think it's pretty much the same.
I had called a very dear friend of mine is the chairman of the COG up in Ashe County, whatever they call that one. Northwest North Carolina. And I called him.
High country.
And yeah, he is, and that's how they refer to everything up there as the high country. And I asked him if he had an attendance policy, and he said, yeah, we do. And it was, you have to make 4 of the 6 meetings. Somehow or other from there, we went off and we was talking about bourbon. But they do have one. The other COGs, I do not know.
I can reach out to the clerks at all the COGs and ask them.
That's a good idea.
We give you our training to do research too, maybe draft something and bring something back to the next meeting.
So we'll work on something. I think the real outstanding question is, what do we do? Do we necessarily create an automatic vacancy for folks that are, and do we have one, maybe just we would have special considerations for whether it's affecting our quorum and whether it's driving a great distance. I mean, if somebody's local, if Lynn were having attendance problems and is coming from, Carolina Beach or, works just north of here, or if Brenda were having attendance problems, I think that would be much different than Lamont having attendance problems. And do we have a policy that treats it differently? I don't know that it would be fair, but it's worth considering.
Well, let's not negate the fact that the calendar is already out. The calendar for the rest of the year, right?
Yes.
We can plan accordingly. I mean, we've been assigned to this board, right? And you adjust fire.
Every meeting I have for the year.
Is already in my
It's already
calendar.
on my
That's
calendar.
right,
I just don't book anything that conflict with that.
right. I understand the hour and a half or even
that's
Teresa, I
fine.
understand her dilemma, Hampstead traffic. I deal with it too. I think there are excused absences, and I don't think one person is going to be able to execute anything, even to make up it could come down if only 2 members were here, 3 members to make up a quorum for the clerk.
Yeah,
Right, so 3 members out of 5 is gonna make your quorum.
you're correct.
Well, we'll take a crack at a policy. We'll address the absences and the vacancy question. We'll just try to define and come up with some examples of excused absences. And we'll discuss it at our next meeting.
That work for everybody? Okay, thank you. Good discussion. Bylaws amendment. Okay, it's in your packet.
So there are a number of very, very minor corrections that I'm not going to bring to your attention that are sort of either grammatical or spelling errors or things of that nature. The one change that's substantial is on page 3 of 6, Article 7, Officers, Executive Committee and Executive Director Appointments, Section 1. We've removed the language at your request from the last meeting that no two officers may be from the same county. As we discussed last time, we have two officers from the same county. We didn't realize that that was in the bylaws. It doesn't seem like it's a problem. Again, with the distance that people travel and things of that nature, I think we want willing people who are willing to serve as officers to be able to serve as officers. I think that this board, by its nature, understands its regional focus, that it wouldn't be a good idea to have, for example, all 3 members from the same county. We want as much geographic diversity as we can get, but we also want people who want to serve to be able to serve. And we, I guess, like we said, we currently have 2 from the same county and it's not a problem. So if it's not a problem, maybe we shouldn't make it a problem.
Yeah, I'm knocking upside the head like anybody.
Yeah. And she has.
So that's the rationale. Again, it was at this, based on the discussion we had last month or last meeting. There's nothing else of note by my eyes in this, in these changes. Is there any discussion or questions about that change? This, by the way, you guys would not be adopting this amendment to the bylaws. You would be recommending it to the general membership to adopt at the annual meeting, because the bylaws changes get approved by the entire board or the entire delegation.
We just need a motion.
Well, is there any discussion about this? Does anybody have a problem with the way things are right now? Only based on our last discussion?
See a problem. As long as everything's going good, boy. I change it.
Well, if we were to present this to the body at the annual meeting and they vote to accept this, then either Brenda or I gotta step down.
If they vote not to accept it.
Right.
Yeah. I will say this, the executive committee nominates officers. And then the full delegation elects the officers. So if they don't want 2 officers from the same county, they don't need to vote for it.
That's right. And giving up control. I know a lot of people don't like to hear that. You're giving up control of the voting party who they want to put in there. And y'all did good. Y'all worked good together.
Well, it's not the first time it's been done. If I'm not mistaken, like Jonathan Barfield and Charlie Ridenbark was both on.
Correct.
I don't think they were both officers. I don't think Jonathan was ever an officer. Charlie was the
He'd
treasurer.
been a chair before.
He wasn't a chair.
That's right, Charlie was treasurer.
Yeah. And,
He was municipal.
well, Deb was the assistant, chair or vice chair, whatever it is, wasn't she one time?
Who's that?
Deb Hayes.
Deb Hayes, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right. While Charlie was treasurer. And so we just didn't know it was in the bylaws, so we never complied with it. So it's obviously never been a problem. It's a problem that we haven't been complying with it, but having 2 officers from the same county is not
Shame on
been a
us.
problem.
Shame.
Section 5 of Article 7, last sentence says all members shall continue to serve until the successor is appointed. What if you have a resignation? Or what if you have somebody that doesn't get reelected?
So,
Which happens.
Right.
so that wouldn't apply in that situation because you would no longer be a member if you were not eligible to be a member. So if you were no longer elected official and you were not eligible, so this would only apply if somebody who, let's just say as an example, if I'm not sure where it would apply, honestly.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just saying, the verbiage in it, all members shall continue to serve until the successor is appointed. I would change the verbiage if it were me. That's just, me looking at the black and white. The council could probably chime in and have her thoughts.
You got a point.
What section are you looking at? Section 5?
Article 7, Section 7. I'm sorry,
Five.
Section 5, I said.
Trying to think of a situation where somebody,
Well, I'll give you a thing, sir. Commissioner Smith just stepped down, right? It's gonna be effective March 1. And he was or is on this board. Is that what I'm understanding or no?
Yeah.
Or is it just
No,
me?
it's not.
Okay, so if he were, you would want him still to come to the meetings until we're in February, so May, he would have to come for the May meeting in hopes that the county commissioners would appoint him to this board.
I'm trying to think, so a vacancy would occur if somebody were no longer eligible, in which case that sentence wouldn't make sense.
Or somebody passed away, God forbid, but it could happen. Right.
It has happened.
Well, I mean, the board does have the ability to call a special meeting to address something like this if a vacancy occurred. Yeah, you could strike the sentence, but I mean, what you don't want to have is a triggering event where you can't get a quorum for some reason. So if a vacancy occurred and if you wanted to replace that person, then the executive committee would have a special meeting and fill the vacancy.
No,
I would agree to that somewhat, Ms. Fox. What I would say is if somebody else, for the executive side, at least in Pender County, we all agree as a board who's gonna go to the COG or the WMPO or whatever, right? So the COG could call a special meeting, yes, and that's the part I would agree with you on. In contrast, if somebody else wanted to be on that board, now they've got to go to the county commissioner, hey, I want to do it, well, this person wants, and it's a big discussion within the commission.
But in any case, whatever the county commissioners decide is
Who's gonna fill?
who's gonna fill the
Right.
seat, and there is no member to continue serving until their successor is appointed, like you're the member until you're not the member. So I think what I will suggest is I will spend some time trying to think of an example of when this might be a useful sentence. But I think my instinct is that it would just never apply. And so it's not necessarily a problem that it's in there. It's just not necessarily helpful that it's in there. But I would hate to take it out if there were a scenario where it would be valuable. But I think it's probably just an extra language that's not helpful is my
Safety net.
suspicion.
A safety net. Thinking forward, been
Like
proactive.
in many boards, this has been a valuable sentence that has allowed the board to continue to operate. You know, maybe if a meeting is, let's say there's, I guess this would apply if at the annual meeting, this would never happen. But if at the annual meeting, there were not a quorum and they could not elect new members, the municipal members would be able to continue to serve until we could have an annual meeting and elect new members. There's an example, a very unlikely example of when this would help us. Because you're only elected for a year. And if the annual meeting were unable to be held for some reason, you could continue to serve until the next election.
I think that's the most
Logical.
logical case. I think it's, aren't there, I could be wrong, but like if no one runs for a municipal office, I think you serve in that position until that board appoints someone to replace you, right? So like
So as long as they're reelected.
if I don't run for mayor this time, no one runs, then there is no new elected. I would still be mayor for that short period of time until the board appointed somebody to be. I think that's how it works.
Or maybe
But
another
those
example,
sorts of scenarios are the only ones, that's just so you can continue the board until such time as you can appoint.
maybe
somebody.
another example would be, let's say you decided you didn't want to be on the executive committee anymore, and we nominated somebody new who, for whatever reason, became ineligible between the nomination time and when the annual meeting or something. And so we needed you to continue serving until they could replace you.
If it's not hurting anything, I would just leave it there.
It ain't broke, don't fix it.
I mean, that's what I've got out of this.
And back to what Sam was saying earlier, if somebody drops off the board, it just creates that vacancy.
And this board can fill the vacancy.
Right.
So we lose somebody in between annual meetings, this board can deal with it.
Yeah. Okay. Any other points in this amendment?
I think the question was, do you need a motion for us, or you just look
No,
at
yeah,
consensus?
I
and then it'll be
think, I think a motion to recommend this amendment to the general membership.
All right, I'll give it a shot. So I make a motion to recommend the amendments to the bylaws as presented.
Second.
Lynn and Brent? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all. Moving on. The nominating committee's report. Again, in your packet. So this is where we are. You see all the names on it. The 4 county commissioners, 1 from each county. The executive committee municipal members. Basically, no changes is where we're at. And the officers would remain. And this would get presented to the general membership at our annual meeting at the end of February for their approval, or they can put up a slate or anything they want.
So yeah, I think what this is, so this is the nominating committee's recommendation to the full executive committee.
Correct.
To vote on, to send to the full delegates at the annual meeting.
I ask who's the nominating committee? I missed that meeting. So
Right, it's the officers.
Okay.
The officers are the nominating committee.
Yeah, we had a discussion, Stephanie, last time about the 3 officers are the nominating committee, and we're putting forward ourselves, but I think we were all saying we kind of made a call to everybody, who else wants in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody
Yeah,
wanted,
an email went out.
yeah, so.
Well, I wasn't getting the emails at the time. That's why I'm asking. I think I was put on this committee, sworn in on the 2nd. I probably didn't get that. So that's why I'm asking.
So, and actually the email was probably sent only to the municipal members. So the county members didn't get it. And we asked, are there any delegates who are interested in serving on the executive committee?
Right.
I did get 2 responses. So Mayor Liz White from Oak Island said she is interested. Of course, we have a Brunswick County member who's interested in continuing to serve and is an officer. And then I got a response from David Joyner from the city of Wilmington, who he wanted me to share the dates of the meetings, and I did, and I didn't hear back from him.
Okay.
So either the dates conflicted, or in any case, he didn't respond. So those are the only,
Well, and I had gotten one.
And you got one.
Mayor Jeff Weinkoff of Boiling Spring Lakes expressed interest.
And I think historically, we have always had, and it's probably just a numbers game, because there are 19 municipalities in Brunswick County. We've had a lot more interest out of Brunswick County than we have, generally speaking, from other counties. And it not just from serving on the executive committee. Ryan Merrill's no longer on, I don't believe, but he's a commissioner in Belleville who is frequently a remote participant, although not a voting member.
Oh, that's Ryan.
Oh, you are on, Ryan.
Sorry, my name changed.
Yeah, you threw me off. Thank you for being here. From time to time, we'll get, what's her name? Sheila Grady from,
Yes.
Northwest. Every once in a while, Alan Holden will join.
Mayor Alt.
Mayor Alt from Southport from time to time will join. All Brunswick County municipalities have had that sort of added level of participation. That being said, there are 4 municipalities in New Hanover County. There are 5 or 6 maybe in Pender County, including Atkinson and Watha and some pretty tiny towns. So I think
Brunswick has a.
Yeah.
Brunswick has a lot. And so, I think by that nature, we've just had more interest out of Brunswick County, but we don't really have a free spot on the board for Brunswick County. We've got a very participating member of Brunswick County.
Thank you.
I don't think Brenda's missed a meeting.
I think not.
But I'll just hit her upside the head.
I think I did hear your footsteps.
My mother. With a wooden spoon.
So, there was discussion at the last meeting about the nominating committee frequently nominates existing members as the nominees. And I think we've talked already at length about some of the complexities of this board and how too much change is probably not a good thing. You need some years in it to understand. And then also just sort of not by our doing, primarily at the county level, we've had a number of changes. And not just at the county level, we had Charlie was no longer nominated by or appointed by City of Wilmington to serve on their behalf. And so we get fresh ideas, new members on this board inherently without the nominating committee really needing to engineer that. Yes, is the point. So.
Is there any other discussion? If none. Does everybody understand what we're doing? We're sending this piece of paper with all the names on it to the general membership for the meeting. When the heck is it?
The 27th.
On February 27th, for the general membership to approve. Everybody good? Okay. I don't want, I didn't realize we were doing it. I will accept a motion.
So move.
Ren, second.
Second.
Lynn. All those in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you, everybody. Well, any opposed?
Nope.
Annual meeting agenda. Alan.
So this is just sort of a formality, but I don't know, I don't think there's any requirement in our bylaws or anything, but we have typically put the annual meeting agenda on your agenda for approval to send to, before we distribute it to the members for the annual meeting. So it is in your packet. It's pretty standard. We'll call to order. We'll do the invocation and the pledge. We'll ask for any agenda amendments. There typically are none. We will ask for approval of the minutes from last year's annual meeting. A bylaws amendment that we just discussed, we'll ask for them to vote on that. And then we'll ask them to vote on electing the executive committee members and officers. And then we'll present the public officials directory and annual report, and we will adjourn that meeting. Typically, this is a 5 to 10 minute meeting. So hopefully we'll be again.
Everybody good?
We typically do ask for a motion to approve that meeting agenda.
It's actually. All right, I have a motion from Brenda, second please.
Second.
Glenn? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you all. All right, finance report. Ooh, baby, riveting.
Well, after all the discussion about bylaws, I figured I'd wake you up a little bit. This is our budget report. You should have all received it through January 31st of 2025. For the new members, we have a fiscal year that ends on June 30th, but quite a bit of our funding has multiple year ends because of the way the funding sources come through. So some of the stuff, it looks like we're underspent or overspent, but we're really not. And I'll go through it and compare it as based upon what their spending cycle is like. So in our Continuum of Care program, which is our homeless services department, we have we're pretty much on target for where we need to be. The ESG program, that is a calendar year basis spending. So we just got a renewed funding for that. So that's why that's a little bit underspent. It's just because we'll spend part of it this year and part of it next year. Our HUD PSH program, that's at 94%, but that is all we're going to spend. That is where we had picked up some of the, so we wouldn't lose the funding within the community for some permanent supportive housing. We took that on, but another organization now has taken that on. So that was just us finishing up our obligations through December 31st. And
that was really just a timing issue. So
yeah.
Our grant was expiring. The agency that was picking up the project needed to start ramping up, and we just didn't quite get all of the funds of our funds spent before they were up and running. Once they were up and running, there was not really any spending we could do.
Yeah, because we agreed to pay the rents, and so they had taken over the rents, and as leases were expiring, they were taking over those leases. So it's like Alan said, it's pretty much just like a timing kind of difference. There's no way that we could cut it off right here and then move it right over there, just because people came on the program at different times, year-long leases. So it's just how it fell through.
We paid as many deposits and things that we could for new leases for folks to try to spend that down on behalf of the other agency that picked it up. But we feel like, while it's certainly a shame, it's actually, frankly, we did a pretty good job spending down with the transfer, the way it was timed out.
And any questions about our homeless service program? And I was just going to point out that the planning grant is it's at 73%, which is a little higher than probably where it should be. But in the month of January, they do their point in time count. So a lot more, that planning grant helps pay for those expenses. So a lot more time and salary and effort went into the month of January. So it's a little bit overspent just because of the way the workflow works with that grant and what we're allowed to pay for. Yeah.
I just have a general question.
Yes, ma'am.
You just do this every meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Keep up with what's being spent and what's out there. What do y'all discuss the next budget year? Is that at one of the future meetings?
That would be, we will present the new budget at our May meeting. Okay. Yes, ma'am. That would be the first reading of the budget, and then the approval will be in June.
The budgeting process for the COG is not going to resemble in any way the budgeting processes that you go through. I'm terribly sorry that I'm not going to book you guys a bunch of meetings for budget workshops and things of that nature. The reality is almost all of our funding is grant funding. The grants have very specific scopes of work and the funds can't be intermingled. And so we can't take money from grant A and put it into project B or whatever. And so most of our budgeting is more of a technical exercise of, you know, how much money are we getting for this program and how do we spend 100% of that money on that program? So we will present to you a fully functioning budget that is ready for, well, it'll be ready for adoption, but it'll just be presented to you for adoption at the following meeting. We'll go into more detail when we present it to you about, you know, what went into it, et cetera, in case you guys have questions. But there's not a lot of discretion or flexibility in our budget. And so we don't waste your time with a bunch of meetings about budgets.
Do you see anything on the horizon for cuts? Because I know a lot of stuff's been frozen federally.
When that first came out, I'd reached out to all the program directors because we are a reimbursable based organization. We have some in reserves that we could use, but it wouldn't get us very far. But we haven't heard of any, I know the system for the HUD money we were locked out of that for about 24 hours, but I didn't need the funds at that particular time. But some of our organizations in the community did need to get at that funds. And so that day they were restricted, but
I think everything's on the table.
Yeah.
Right? So because we are primarily a grant funded, you know, in theory, everything's at risk always. But you know, we're always monitoring appropriations bills and things of that nature in federal budgets because, you know, at the end of the day, none of our funding is guaranteed ever.
And the aging department is very well keeping the directors and everybody, because that's probably our largest funding source is the AAA. And they were very good about keeping us updated. I think Holly was forwarding me emails at least every other day, if not every day, about what the situation was. And Workforce it does pretty good when they hear something, but they were letting us know. So but we do keep on top of it and we try to figure it out. And, you know, like I said, a lot of our contractors are reimbursable basis too. So we would have to deal with all of that at that particular time.
Also, like, all this is funded through the end of the budget year.
We think so.
I mean, it is, I don't have it in the bank. I have to draw it down, but,
And because it's reimbursable, we don't draw it down in advance.
Right.
In theory, it's at risk.
Yeah.
It always is. I think the difference is that there's been, you know, more talk about freezing funds now in the middle of a fiscal year than there really ever has been.
Would there be any way need to call any special emergency meeting if like any funding dropped or?
I mean, it's possible.
It's possible.
I mean, I'm not.
The reality is, like, we would have the adopted budget. You guys would have given us the authority to spend the funds. We wouldn't spend them if we thought that we didn't have them, if we wouldn't be reimbursed for them.
Okay.
And so whether we would have an emergency meeting or just reach out to everybody and let you know what we're doing.
Okay. Yeah, it would depend on what actions needed to be taken, how severely the cuts. I mean, it would just be odd. If we needed to have a special meeting, I'm sure Alan and Mike would call one. It just, we don't know it's so,
Yeah.
Nobody, you know, it's not I can't give you a definite answer. I'm sorry. That's not very good.
Years that I've been in jail.
No, I mean,
No.
we had,
You ain't had a Doge department either.
no.
No.
Yeah, it's a little different.
I know. And like, I watch the news on a constant basis. I reach out to them. I mean, we have good communication between our departments. So we have been speaking with each other. So we kind of I didn't pull everybody in and say, we need to figure out what we're going to do, but I did kind of say, if y'all heard anything,
Be on
so.
Be on alert. All right, thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
We have had in the past, before I was executive director, times when there were funding issues and the federal government had, you know, maybe not adopted a continuing resolution or something along those lines. And, you know, federal funds were frozen and we had to, you know, talk about, or, you know, how long are we gonna keep our staff on, and are we gonna, you know, have to, you know, either lay people off permanently or temporarily or whatever. We're hoping not to have any of those discussions, but if we had to do anything drastic like that, we would involve the board.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Just very quickly, going through, it looks like most of our other programs are right on track to where, you know, we need to be. An LGS, the Southeastern Crescent and the ARPA are a little bit underspent, but we're spending more on those. So we hope to get those spent, or at least the spending increased a little bit. Aging program is right on target to where they need to be, with the counties. We pay a month behind. So that's why that's at 51% as opposed to 58%, because like I said, we're reimbursed. So what we paid in January was actually for December expenses. And we finally have all of our, we wrote out a pretty large check to quite a few of the counties in December because we finally got all the contracts back and we got all the spending and everything in. So it was,
The Brunswick County. Yep.
yes. It was a sizable chunk. And then
I took a picture of the check because I'd never seen the check. It's about $500,000.
We're the oldest county in the state.
Are you really? I didn't realize that.
Based on age.
Our average age.
Not the first county.
Is.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I got confused. Now I understand what you meant.
Our average age is 58.7 years old.
Yes, sir.
And we got a lot of blue hair.
Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful community to retire to.
They can slow down.
Just not getting older, Mike.
Any other questions about our budget and expenditure report? And I am, as I've told y'all before, if you do go over it and you have any more questions, or if you have any questions specifically about how we, how our funding works and how everything goes, I'm here most days. So all you gotta do is just give me a call and I will gladly answer any questions that you have.
I will add, you will see in the workforce budget that as of the last meeting, we had that discussion about the fund balance that we had appropriated. Based on the discussion, we did amend the budget to make that fund balance available in case we need to return it to the state. We are very hopeful that we will not have to return it to the state, and are in communication with them. They were telling us to return those funds, and when we pushed them a little bit harder, they said, well, we're gonna wait to see what the Department of Labor says.
Good job, Alan.
So we'll fight to spend those funds, in-house. I think we'll be able to, but at the end of the day, if we lose that battle, you guys have given us the authority to return it.
Before I move on to the budget amendment, budget ordinance amendment, I think y'all need to,
If it's an actionable act.
yes.
I need a motion.
So moved.
Right? Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Didn't think so.
No opposed, but Mike, I have one question.
Sure.
It says unaudited. What is that?
Well, that's just, they haven't been audited. We're only audited once a year, just so y'all,
During the fiscal.
this is during just so I didn't want anybody to assume that these were audited.
Yeah, we'll present audited numbers once a year after the audit.
All right. Item B, budget ordinance amendment number 3.
This is just a little bit of cleanup money for our area agency on aging. When they give us our annual allocation, I'm not sure how we might be able to end this constant confusion for me, but for some reason, they don't tell us what our senior center general purpose money is that helps run the senior centers. And we get that later in the year. So this is an amendment to be able to accept the money from the state and spend it for senior center general purpose. And then also in our MIPA, which is from the Department of Insurance, which is an educational program for our seniors. When you see a lot of the advertisements for elder abuse and all of that type of stuff on the sides of billboards and the wraps of the buses, that's money for that program to help let everybody know what's going on, especially when they're doing the signups and stuff for Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare, sorry, they don't deal with Medicaid. Add that, we got $10,000 more than what we anticipated. So I told Holly, I said, double check with him to make sure that's right. She said, yeah, that was right. So.
We'll take more money.
Yeah.
Always.
But that's what this amendment is, giving us the opportunity to spend this.
Any questions? A motion, please.
Oh, motion.
Brenda?
Second.
Mitch? I gotta write this down. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passed. All right, staff reports, Alan.
I don't have too much for you because I had plenty for you before. In your packets, I do have the contract summary, which for the benefit of our newest member. The executive committee has given me authority to execute contracts on your behalf, especially since we don't meet monthly, with certain limitations. And one of the understandings is that in exchange for that authority, I'll present to you a list of all the contracts that we've entered since, on your behalf since the last time I presented to you guys. And so you can see we've got about $200,000 worth of revenue contracts where we're receiving funds and about $1.3 million worth of contracts for commitments, including that $1.2 million contract to Brunswick County, which finally was executed since the last meeting, or at least since I presented it to you before the last meeting. I tried to include all of the departments and programs and other acronyms that I used in those contract summaries. Sometimes I forget one, so if you see something that's not in there and you don't know what it is and you have questions, let me know and I can add it. The only other thing I have for you guys, and it's really just sort of a comment, but I thought I would bring it to your attention just because it was brought to my attention. Mayor Toner from St. James will be unable to attend our annual meeting because apparently it conflicts with something that the league does in Raleigh, League of Municipalities in Raleigh the day before.
Mayor's meeting?
No,
State municipality.
is, state legislative. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
We're gonna go and come back that night.
Same.
she was wanting us to coordinate better and not try to avoid that conflict. As you guys know, we reserve the annual meeting venue about a year in advance, and the league hasn't set their meeting date yet. They do say it's typically, what was it, the third or fourth Wednesday?
It's the third or fourth Wednesday whenever legislation's in session.
We're always the fourth Thursday, so I guess if they choose the fourth Wednesday, then it will conflict, and if they choose the third Wednesday, it won't. It's not, I don't think
It's not a conflict, though.
It's not.
That meeting is Wednesday night.
They say they stay up and don't come back.
Yeah, but we used to do that. I mean, this is the first time we coming back the same night. And it's only because the one driving is the youngest person that can. I mean, we were prepared to go and spend the night, but every time we've ever done it, we breakfast and then come on home.
Yeah, that's
We're home
what
by
my
then.
group is doing, is we go up Wednesday, we have the dinner Wednesday night, we don't drive back Wednesday night. And then we drive back Thursday and I'll drive back and go straight to this.
Yeah.
And dinner is at 5:30?
They don't.
Right, how does it conflict?
The only reason I'm bringing it to your attention is because you guys set the date of the annual meeting. And she wants you to coordinate better or us to coordinate better. I think we're doing as good as we can, but I just didn't want to not bring it to your attention.
We always look to improve.
Noted.
That's all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
Anybody have anything, Val? If not, I hear you on aging, Holly.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me update you today. If you ever want more details on anything Alan or Dawn mentions, I'm happy to go into detail about that, but don't want to take too much of your time up. So please always call me. The MIPA is Medicare Improvement for Patient and Providers Act, and it just helps people have access to information on more affordability. Meaning they might be eligible for a low income subsidy to help with their Medicare cost. And then the senior center general purpose funds, those funds are state funds, and the senior centers have to be approved as excellent merit, or they just don't go for any kind of notoriety with it, and they get a smaller cut of the senior center general purpose funds. Yeah, so that's all that is, that state funds. And it was a lot later this year because usually they add it to our NGA with all of our money and resend it, but they figured out this year they should send a different NGA, which was true. And they just sent it a lot later than usual. So next year it should be right back on schedule with that. Mr. Coleman, I'm sure you're aware in Columbus County, you guys had asked everybody to cut their budgets by a little bit. So the Department of Aging in Columbus County is going to stop doing their weekend shelf stable meals for their home delivered meals clients, which was never a requirement for us. Monday through Friday is all we ever required, but Columbus County went above and beyond for a very long time doing weekend meals. They are going to send a letter, and they're going to make sure those people are very well aware of all the access to food pantries, to any kind of extra food if they might need it for the weekends. And then we also are getting a state fiscal recovery grant for nutrition called PEAS, Providing Elders Additional Substance, which Christy Massey's aware of, that she might can help at the weekends if those folks need it for the most vulnerable. We have a new grant, which you saw on the budget for Choosing Home, which is state fiscal recovery funds also. It's about $50,000 per county for housing and home improvement, but it's very flexible funds, which they were excited about because usually our funds are tied to a lot of criteria and are pretty pigeonholed to what you can do. So both of those grants proposals should be out in the next couple of weeks to your counties. The PEAS one for nutrition is about $32,000 for each county. Which will help quite a few people with that. We had a very successful Forget Me Not Memory Cafe for people with memory impairment and their caregivers. Had about 60 people there with a music therapist recently. We are doing dementia friends training for Med North staff downtown, the Department of Social Services here in New Hanover County, and the senior center staff. And then in Leland, we are going to be doing a showing of the documentary Taking Care by Seth Rogen, who talks about his mother-in-law with early onset Alzheimer's. And we'll be doing that on April 23rd, partnering with the town of Leland, AARP, Lower Cape for Life Care, Alzheimer's Association, and Brunswick Senior Resources. We will be doing that in all 4 counties. We have an education plan for Navassa for caregivers. We'll be in Pender County today for heart health at Pender Adult Services. And in Columbus County, we're starting our monitoring March 1st. So we are busy.
Any questions for Holly? Oh, Miss Andrea, good time. You walked in just in time.
Say, I hate following up Holly. I'm like, man, I want to do all of that. Hi, thanks for having me. So January's been a whirlwind for homeless services, a couple major events happening both in January and February. We did have our HUD COC grant awards were announced in January. And so we were able this year to increase our award amount 51%. So we went from 500 something to 845,524. That includes a new really wonderful project in Pender County, a rapid rehousing project for victims of domestic violence. So we're really excited about bringing in new programming and new funding.
And this is not just for us, it is for the all the agencies in the
All
area.
of the, yes. Yeah. We are the lead agency for, yeah. And those are right through HUD, so.
Yeah, no, I just, because I,
Yeah.
y'all won't be getting it.
Well, that Pender County project is not gonna reflect in our budget. We won't be running that program. We just managed the process where that Pender County agency was able to receive the funds.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. We are the COC lead agency, so we are responsible for monitoring and kind of overseeing those things, but it does not come through us directly. We also were able to conduct our point in time count in January. So every year in the last 10 days of January, HUD tasks the COCs to do a census count of folks experiencing unsheltered and sheltered homeless in our counties. So we're really excited this year. We had a lot more coordination and some really great volunteer teams in all 3 counties. We did get a lot of media coverage for our efforts. And we're able to have really maximum coverage. So it's a lot of what you would think of a census is instead of knocking on a door, you're kind of coming into those places that folks are living unsheltered. So it might be we have quite a few folks that were in different trees and kind of foresty areas. We also covered a lot of our community partners and we're able to really work together to get as many folks as we can count it. And that's to allow us to be able to use that data to strategically implement resources to get a picture of what folks have. We asked where's the last place they had stable housing. We asked what they felt contributed to their housing and just get a little picture of what's happening with those folks. People get really excited and want to know what happened. And so it is obviously February, but we have a long process of data quality and being able to make sure there's unduplicated numbers and get to the bottom of those things. But as soon as we have data, we'll definitely share it with all of our partners. We also were very privileged to have last week a 3-day visit from our HUD technical assistance team. So we are able to get technical assistance that HUD funds through a ICF, which is a consulting company. And that core team came in to focus on our plan to increase our capacity to offer supportive housing in all 3 counties and to help us use a community approach to do that. We had a community workshop that was really well attended, and then we have a core team that are working on those things. So for example, in our COC, we have about 109 individuals that are currently served through permanent supportive housing, but we know there's a greater need. And so bringing more units into those spaces is really important. Of that 109, only less than half are funded by our COC. So we are looking at other partners. How do we increase that capacity, not just through our funding, but throughout? And then coordinated entry, which is our direct hotline. We did have 113 calls in January. Looking at calendar year 2024, we had 1,667 calls. So they were managing that as we were also counting folks. And then we did have 46 individuals enter coordinated entry, and those are folks that are experiencing homelessness that need immediate assistance kind of navigating the system. And so our folks helped get those folks into the system and then connected to the resources like street outreach, like some of our providers, to make sure that they're able to access those things.
I'm sorry, I was just on that.
I was gonna say,
The pick count that they're doing, that she said the last 10 days, that's a really big deal because that gives HUD and it gives us an estimate of how many homeless people are in the 3 counties, and that affects the funding that we get directly from HUD for our area to help with homelessness. So that was a really big project that she undertook.
well, thank you for that, Andrea. Any questions for Andrea?
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, if I could, so are you breaking that data down by county?
Yes.
And how does that line up with this US Census? Your numbers?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So when we looked at the data, we went back, this was a while ago, so just bear with me, not through the current data, obviously, but we looked at 2008, 2009 through 2024. We actually had around a 6% decrease in overall homelessness in that time. We've obviously seen a big, we were on a downward slope, and then Hurricane Florence hit, and then COVID hit. And so that slope has gone out, but we have not still rebounded to like 2008, 2009 numbers. But over the same time period, we had an over 30% increase in total population in our region. So.
And you're getting that from what?
The census data, the AC, something,
ACS.
yeah, ACS, thank you. And then the other interesting part in our area, we are tasked with a lot of different reports to HUD, such as our system performance measures. So it's not enough for us to say this many people were housed. They have a look back system that goes into our system and sees if those folks ever return to homelessness. Is it the first time they're experiencing homelessness, or is this the 5th time? We have a much higher percentage. I think over the state average is 69% of folks entering homelessness, it's their first time. Our area, it's 79%. So we have a much higher number of folks that are just experiencing this. It's not, we think about the chronically homeless folks that we see day in and day out, maybe that are more visible, but a lot of our population are very new to homelessness. I'm actually on another meeting, but also navigating a couple calls from some individuals that are just lost and don't know what to do, and trying to get those to the right assessors. So we have a vast diversity of folks experiencing homelessness. Some folks and some counties see things, have different trends. And so we're able to break that down. We haven't always been able to so much, but that's a big push that we're doing this year.
There's one thing I like to always remind folks of with regard to the point in time count. And that is that there's no way to know if the increase in numbers let's say there's an increase in numbers, increase, decrease, whatever it is. There's no way to know what share of that is an actual increase and what share of that is better counting on our part.
Right, yeah.
We can never know that. And we are out in the field trying to find people who don't want to be found, right? And so it's not a census, it's an attempt at a census, but it is not a count of every homeless person, because there are lots of homeless people who we're not going to find because they don't want to be found. Like, thank goodness the partners in Pender County knew to go to certain places to find folks living in like storage sheds. Mm-hmm. You're not going to go knock on every storage shed in Pender County to see if there's a homeless person there. And so because we had better knowledgeable people on the ground, we'll probably see an increase in the count numbers in Pender County. Is that because there are more homeless people in Pender County, or is that because we're counting better? We'll never know the answer to that question. So we always do need to take those individual year over year counts a little bit, at face, not at face value, with a grain of salt. Long-term trends are a little bit better, but still could be a long-term trend in better counting. Well, because we do get better at this over time.
And to add to that, we do find that we overrepresent in the point in time count with folks that are individuals, not in families, though we know those folks are out there, but we also know a lot of the folks that are in families are staying in cars. We know that from our database that tracks that. And so they are much less likely to want to be counted, because if you have children, that that's really scary. The thought of maybe DSS being involved, even though they come with lots of great resources, there is that fear. We also probably.
And they're mobile.
Yeah, and they're mobile. Harder to find. We were talking about that, like how aggressive do we come up to a car? Because also, is that safe to be like, excuse me, I would like to give you an interview? And is it that they just have a lot of kids and their car's a mess? But then we also look at, we probably undercut our folks that are employed, because some of the hours we're out there are when folks are employed. So we know that we do catch those, but so there are some people that are easier to count than others. And that's why it's just one piece of our data picture. We have a couple different TA, not only the permanent supportive housing TA, but we also have a system performance measure contract going on right now. And they are digging into our database. They're digging into how we've been able to improve our system, and helping us to continue to do that, so that when folks do have questions or want that data, we can be very confident in what we're able to provide, and we're getting there.
Do you coordinate with the school systems, because they keep up with the McKinney-Vento kids or parents?
So yes, we do. But the tricky part is McKinney-Vento through the school system, even though they're both under the McKinney-Vento Act, have a different definition of homelessness. So the folks that are McKinney-Vento homeless in the school system are sometimes doubled up, or couch surfing, as we like to call. Those folks don't count into our definitions of homelessness for this. These folks have to be literally homeless or in a shelter. So the numbers are different, but they do help us often get connected with the folks that we know are unsheltered. But their numbers, again, won't necessarily match up, but it's part of that picture for sure.
would have to say housing supply problems and cost of housing.
Yeah.
Probably a lot to do
That's,
with it.
we just looked at housing, availability and cost has been the number one thing that folks have responded to. We have a lot of folks, we've seen a trend of older, adults that their fixed income can't keep up with the amount of money they have to pay. So actually across the board between aging and workforce, we're trying to work on those together and tackle that as a whole unit. But it is something we've definitely noticed. I know some of our shelters have noticed that folks are definitely, our mean age is gone up quite a bit.
Any other questions for Andrew? Actually, Wes is not here, so we have nothing for LGS.
So Wes McLeod, our local government services director, wanted me to apologize for his absence, but he sent me some updates to share with you all from the LGS department. So we're continuing to provide training, valuable training to the communities in the region, most recently conducting training sessions in Topsail Beach, Sunset Beach, Burgaw, Charlotte, and Pender County. Our flood mitigation program is continuing to provide outreach to communities in the region to assist homeowners with funding to elevate or purchase their previously flooded homes. Chip Bartlett, our grant specialist, also spent a week in Asheville assisting North Carolina Emergency Management with homeowner intake for those impacted by Hurricane Helene. There are a number of projects ongoing with the LGS department. Several recently submitted proposals to complete projects for member communities, land use plans, ordinance work, for example. And then I specifically have a few updates from the RPO. So our advisory committee meets this Friday. I have a note, Commissioner Forte, to check on our attendance policy, just to provide relevant context there. I'll do some homework. For all of our members across the COG, for your benefit, about 2 weeks ago, the state released a draft of the 2026 to 2035 State Transportation Improvement Program, the STIP, the 10-year, DOT's 10-year document. That will be in draft form, not to be approved by the Board of Transportation until this summer. But the highway divisions at DOT are hosting open houses for people to drop in and ask questions. Division 3, which includes Pender, New Hanover, and Brunswick County, that open house will be next week, February 17th through 21st at their division office in Castle Hayne. And then Division 6, which covers Columbus County, their open house will be the following week, February 24th through 28th at their division office in Fayetteville. We also have a number of transportation plans ongoing countywide for Columbus, a long-range transportation plan there. Updates to come in the next month or two, as well as our steering committee for Pender County's comprehensive transportation plan. Those meetings will resume here in the next couple of weeks. And then we're also preparing some grant applications for a few member municipalities to submit funding requests for new or updated bicycle and or pedestrian transportation plans. That'll be in the next month or two. So if you have any questions for the RPO, I can take those. Or if you have any questions you want me to pass on to Wes, I'd be happy to do that.
Any questions? Thank you, Sam. Well, Ginger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the first thing I wanted to update you guys on was the funding. So for workforce development, our department is funded through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which has been up for reauthorization for some time. A new piece of legislation was introduced late last year that was completely, I guess, not user-friendly, wouldn't have a good impact. It was going to be part of the continuing resolution, and it was removed. It was one of those many things that was removed, which is sort of good and bad, because we didn't want it to go through. It was ASWA, spearheaded by Virginia Fox, who wants us to spend 40% of our money on direct training costs, which isn't really what we do. You can put a bunch of money in for scholarships, and that's not going to change what we do as workforce developers. And so we're glad it didn't go through. However, with WIOA, we are not part of these immediate cuts because what we do is developing the workforce, and we're not part of those targeted things. However, a year ago, the House Appropriations Committee put out a budget that really gutted our funding, completely removed all of our youth funding. And as you know, that opportunity youth 16 to 24 who aren't in school and aren't employed, that's critical for driving our economy. And so it really takes a lot of work with those young people. And I know Jan and I have talked about this too, but it takes a lot of work to get these young people connected and supported, because oftentimes they're not connected because they haven't been supported historically. So it's, a whole thing. So we're waiting to kind of see, but this month, February, there's a lot of advocacy going on across our country for workforce development through the National Association of Workforce Boards, as well as other associations that are affiliated. My board chair and I will be doing the same. In March, there's an advocacy day, but we're worried that that might be a little too late because the budget will be due. So that's kind of where we are on this. Our funding has a 2-year expiration. However, as our executive director said, if they decide to just stop funding this and they freeze it, then, we're really in a bind. Thankfully, our contracts with our service providers, they're payable, contingent upon funding availability. So I don't know, we've had this discussion, but I don't know that would directly impact the COG immediately as far as, drawing down money from other resources. However, it's something that would have a deep impact on our community. Workforce development is the, I guess, behind the scenes to the far sexier economic development, right? So everything that we do really does drive our local economies. And it's really important that workforce development is understood as relevant. It's not just a side dish to economic development. It's really a driver. And we do work with the continuum of care as well as other entities to try to help these harder to serve clients get into the workforce. And that's not always your people who have been adjudicated or anything like that. Sometimes it's people who are in their 50s who have lost their jobs due to mergers or changes, or, they just were laid off because maybe they were making too much. And you have a hard time with these workers, these older workers, getting into new careers, right? So it's a lot of that. And so we want to make sure that does remain relevant and that everybody is aware of the impact so that we don't look back and it's too late. So there's that.
And particularly in our region where, as Mike was saying, Brunswick County is the oldest county in the state, we've got a lot of people moving to this area, creating demand for goods and services, most of whom have no interest in being in the workforce. And so our region is growing, but our workforce is not growing at nearly the same rate that our region is growing. So if we're going to have workers to support those industries and those businesses, it's critically important that the workforce development component of economic development be there.
And one of the things that we do on our business engagement side of the house that we're required to do under WIOA is sector partnerships. And so we have a very successful Cape Fear manufacturing partnership, which now has over 70 companies that have joined together. And they kind of share the pain points, which sometimes are workforce related and sometimes they're not. They're like warehousing or logistics or whatever. So we're also working on one in construction and then the hospitality tourism area, because those are things that are critical to our area. And so we have, one person that we're able to fund who's dedicated to business services. So she does the research, the data pulls, the convening, and really kind of puts the legs under these partnerships. And that's helping us to see where those needs are and where we need to be focusing our efforts to grow that workforce and to support whatever population we have across our 4-county region. So related to that, we had a visit from our new governor, Stein, last week. It was very last minute. And he wanted to visit our NC Works Career Center. And NC Works, as you know, is a partnership, sort of the umbrella partnership of the state, right? So it's the American Job Center network that exists all across the nation, but in North Carolina, we call it NC Works. It is our job as the Workforce Development Board to oversee operations. We're sort of the lubricant to all the cogs in that wheel that work together to drive services. So they wanted to talk to a participant and an employer who has utilized our services, and they did such a great job. And Commissioner Walker was there, thank you. And they did such a great job really emphasizing the value of the services that they received. So it was a good meeting all in all. Brian Jackson, who's my deputy director, he provided the tour, and Governor Stein had lots of questions. And thankfully, Brian, who is very knowledgeable and you've all met before, was able to answer those. So it was really good. But again, they were really impressed with our center and all that. But if we have issues with funding, we may not be able to have a beautiful center like that. So we're going to be issuing an RFP for our services this year and also for space. And with everything up in the air, I'm just always monitoring this and seeing where we might be able to land as far as space. You know, in Pender County, we moved to access points to better serve the needs of the different pockets of Pender. And in Columbus, we have one site, but we use access points there as well. Brunswick, we're fortunate that through our partnership with Brunswick Community College, we have multiple points as well as our physical site in Charlotte. So we're kind of playing around with what we want to do in New Hanover County. And of course, you know, we'll be having those discussions. So that's where we are. And I'm just trying to remain optimistic. And that's all we can do. So if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ginger. Any questions?
How do your people work so well?
We've got good staff here.
Yes, you do.
We've got experienced staff and they're passionate about what they do.
Thank God.
That's what makes it.
And they work well together. And they work well with their partners in the community and their partners at the state. We're pretty lucky, actually.
Any other questions? Moving on. My comments, let me start by apologizing that this meeting has gone on for quite a while, but we had a lot to discuss this month. And staff, they don't usually last this long. We're generally out of here an hour and 10 or so, hour and 15. I'm looking forward to the annual meeting on the 27th. I hope you are all there. It's a fun night. We feed you well. The business portion is now and says 10 minutes, like, you know, it gets done. So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody all polished up and dressed for the night. It is a good night, so please attend if you are at all able, and if you could tell your municipalities to show up. I mean, what we generally have, what, 150 or so?
We have about 225 people in attendance. I would say probably 150 of them are county and municipal elected officials and staff.
So it would be nice if everybody showed up and give us some notice so we could have food for everybody. With that, I will open the floor. Do any of the members have a comment? Yeah.
Well, I would like to formally introduce myself. I know I'm new here. I know I've met with you, Alan, and you, Ginger, and you. I met with a lot of you folks. I'm new commissioner in Hanover County. Bill's put me here. Bill's the alternate. But I'm looking forward to doing work. And the meeting probably went longer because I asked questions. It might not change, and I apologize, you know, but I'm a very curious person and I like to solve problems. So I know we've had some good discussions, but I'm looking forward to working with them.
Steph and I lived together for a week.
Yeah, he's my ALC buddy.
Good.
Eventually we could work together.
Hey, you just said about me, yeah. It's like ALC for life.
We're all buds.
Yeah.
Welcome
Thank
to
you.
the COG, and please continue to ask questions. There's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And you know, all of these different staff reports for all of these different agencies that we have, there's a lot to learn and how it's funded. A lot to learn.
Yeah, and for the record, I mean, I know those staff reports actually went pretty long. We didn't touch on a lot.
Oh, I know. I could.
We spared you.
It's time to go.
Steph, did you take the 10-cent tour?
Yeah, I had a tour. Yeah, I'll do that.
Any other members have any comments or questions? If not, somebody please say, let's go home.
Go home.
Let's get lunch. We don't want to go home
You need to
today.
eat before you go home.
Yep. We are adjourned.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Hey, thanks. Oh, one last thing. Can you still hear me?
Hang on, hang on. Guys, hold on. Guys, somebody's asking a
Hey,
question.
this is Marty Cook. I'm not going to be able to go to the COG dinner because we are traveling to the National Association of Counties Legislative Conference in DC that same day. So won't be able to make it. Sorry about that.
Thank you, sir.
The day before the DC trip, so my flight's the.
Have a good trip, Marty. If y'all heard me, but anyway.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.
Okay, now. Bye-bye.
I did have Julie. She came to pick up my credit card.
Bye, Jan.
Bye.
Good chunk of my board.